All my life, I've always tried to figure out who I am. I think that's where the creative process comes in, actually. That's the exploration of creativity, is discovering who you are and having a conversation with what you choose to involve yourself with so that it talks back to you. It's quite extraordinary and very mysterious. I actually can't say that I've pursued that all my life, but I will say that making art has saved my life twice, specifically, maybe more, but very specifically twice. When I was very young, I spent a lot of time in a hospital. I had 15 operations before I was 8 years old, and I believe it was traumatic. Of course, they told me it was traumatic. And they had to put me somewhere and keep me busy in between, the downtime in between these operations. And so they put me in the children's art department at New York Hospital. And I completely lost myself in making things, in drawing and constructing, because that's what I did. That's the label I acquired. And because I acquired that label, that's what I did. And then it saved my life again more recently. I hadn't abandoned becoming creative, but I had not really been practicing in the studio for a long time. And I went through a traumatic shift in my life about 7 or 8 years ago, and decided to go back into the studio. And indeed, it really did save me again. It kept me floating instead of sinking into the abyss, and became the conversations I needed to have.
What kind of language do you use in this conversation?
A language completely void of words is the best one, because the creative process is so mysterious. It's visceral. When I say mysterious, I know it, but it's almost like a vapor in a way. It's there. Hold on one second. Repeat that question again, because I completely lost my thought.
What kind of language is connected with this conversation?
It's a conversation that does not use any words. It's a conversation of exploration, of trying and playing and openness, and allowing it to look back at you. It goes back and forth. You do something, you don't know why or what, or you have an idea, or you have a preconceived idea, and then it doesn't turn out that way. And then you look back at what you've done, and it says something else to you, or it reinforces something that you had thought about but hadn't quite realized it in that way. And I've had some really wonderful conversations with my process and surprises. It says, I thought it was that, but it's this.
Is it about resonance?
Yes, I would say there's a resonance about it. When I set out to play in my studio a few years ago, I just started to play. I hadn't painted in a long time, so I just ripped out magazine pages and started to apply paint to magazine pages, and sort of lost myself in the imagery and what the paint was revealing. I was reducing the image, blocking out portions of the image, and got into this sort of cadence of removing parts of the image just based on what I saw, without any thought about what I was doing. And when I finished several pieces, I realized it was on the same line of some work that I had done actually a good 10 years earlier, but completely different. I created these shapes from an image, a recognizable image, could be a person sitting on a chair, but I was more interested in the background and foreground and the folds and the shapes, and the pure, pure visual essence of that photograph. That was sort of a dance. So I didn't know what I was doing. I started to play, and then I just decided to continue that conversation to see how far I can go. Then I started to think about it more concretely, and that's when I got stuck and was leading the witness on, so to speak, too much. And I had to pull back again and let it become what it started off to be, an innocent, purely visceral, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm there. I'm totally there.
Does it help to be an artist, to design books? Because you're a book designer too.
Yes. There is a back and forth, yes, between what I do in the studio and what I do in my graphic design office.
Would you say that designing a book is making a work of art?
No, but it is a creative process. I would like to think that my books ultimately are beautiful and people want to own them, to touch them. They're tactile. They have to be touched. They need to communicate a lot of information. So they are artful, no doubt. They involve a creative process, no doubt. But that world sits in a different place than creating something that is created just so that I can have a conversation with the process and explore things, thoughts, ideas.
A conversation with yourself.
A conversation with myself. I am present in the artwork, whereas in the graphic design, it is my job to not be present. It is my job that the work that it's communicating is the presence. There's no real surprise so much in designing a book. It's much more of a cerebral process and a problem-solving process. I know what it's going to look like before it's done, whereas in my studio, I don't know what it's going to look like.
What does it mean for you to attach your name to your work, to sign?
It means I like it. It means it's good. It means I made a good editing choice, I suppose. Editing is a critical process in the creative process. What you decide to leave on the studio floor and what you decide to pick up and make use of is an editing process. The subject you even choose or the materials you choose to play with is an editing process. The lack of editing is an editing process until you edit it further. But still, it's really important to edit your work, and a really good artist knows what to pick off the studio floor and hang up on the wall and continue with, and what to throw in the wastebasket. And there are some artists that may have profoundly beautiful, good work that they leave on the floor because they haven't seen it. And to me, I think that's the most difficult and an incredibly important part of creating your own work is how you edit, what you choose to edit. I struggle with that a lot. So as a result, there's lots I don't throw away, and every time I throw something away, I regret it. And I'm questioning myself all the time. Do I keep it? Do I change it? Do I stop? Do I continue? Ultimately, when I want to put my name on it, I realize that I've made a good edit and I've made a good choice when to stop.
When you see your work on a wall, would you like sometimes to edit it a little more?
Sometimes. I actually just did that the other day. I have a few works on paper that I pulled out, and they all looked somewhat unresolved. One in particular I really liked, and I put them back up and I made it work. The conversation I would have with myself is don't let it go until it either goes in the garbage or it's done and you like it. So instead of just being unresolved, so instead of leaving it floating.
So, what does it say about your creative process, about your personal conversation with yourself?
It just feels uncomfortable. That's the thing that I think tells me to continue with them.
What are the most challenging aspects for you as a book designer?
Being fresh, not repeating myself. Sometimes the work is very much like other works that I've done, and trying to find a new angle within the constraints, because it does need to fit within the budget and the bindery, and these are not completely open-ended budgets and books that I can really throw all the bells and whistles at. So within those constraints, I try to have fun with them. It helps when I really like the work. I don't like all the work that for the books that I design, but when I'm really excited about the work, it's better.
What's the point about designing books? In what way are you improving the reading experience?
There can be many things that I could touch on that the reader may not be fully conscious that they're being touched. It's a communication. I am presenting one side of the communication. The cover of the book is like sitting in a theater, and you open it up and the performance begins. But not all books are opened up at the beginning, so you can start in the middle. But in any case, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. There's the tactile experience of the book, the objectivity, the objectness of the book. It must not go against what the material is about, because I design art books that must respect the artist's work. I'm not designing the cover of a novel that I'm not illustrating. I'm creating a space, a platform for all of this material. And so it has to have a certain quietness, neutrality. It can't be loud. The overlying importance is that the work is really respected.
Could you work in the same spirit on a digital book?
Absolutely. It's not tactile, but the creative process is very much the same, that the core of how I approach the material is identical. So I'm totally for digital books where they're appropriate. I think with massive books, where there's a lot of data and information, the digital book is very valuable, very useful as a tool.
When I come back to the difference between digital books and books on paper, we're not in the same mood when we read a book on paper and a digital one.
It's one is a cozier experience, no doubt.
Why?
I think because with a book, it's just you and your fingertips touching this object. When you're on the internet, when you're on your computer, actually there's a whole audience back there. You can almost hear the hum of millions of people behind your screen. It's not a lonely experience. It's a place where we go actually to be social. With just a swipe across the screen, you're on Instagram or Facebook and all of this other, and email and all that chatter is there. It's on the screen. And with a book, there's none of that. You really are completely alone with the material.
You told me about how essential creation is for you. Did you learn something essential for your personal life from your designing process?
When I gave myself the label designer, when I allowed myself to call myself a designer, I remember that moment quite profoundly. I had a hesitancy to call myself a designer because I didn't have the confidence, I think, that I trust my judgment fully. And so the moment when I really felt that my opinion was quite valid, and that for me to continue that confidence, I had to award myself the label that I was a designer, just as the same as I did as an artist. But I think when I felt I earned the label designer, it was a big opening for me, and a form of energy, a source of energy that, I still use today.
I'm going to leave the space, keep the microphone, and please add whatever you want to the interview.
Okay, I should have thought about this before. I think we are all creative people, even those that don't think they are creative, because forms of creativity take their shape and their form and their time in many, many different ways. From making a meal, to raising a child, to how your handwriting looks, to how you dress and how you present yourself. Creativity is something that should be nurtured with everybody. So I'm very grateful for Philippe for asking me to speak about this. And I'm done.